yeah, or not reset what's scientific, but actually be able to look at what's scientific and what's the science behind what we're doing, where things are. But one thing, of course, for everyone would be just that the definition of where science is, it's really a collective agreement. And what's the definition really within this is some systematic sort of qualifiedness where something is in observation. And within this, you've got types of validity. Something's got to make face valid, meaning it makes sense when it's said. Okay. Second, it sort of really should have some structure, valid structure underneath, being satisfied. That's one sort of validity. Another type of validity is putting whatever said and things within some context, and that's called contextual validity. Other ways that you've got to support what's scientific more is an expert validity, where other people that have educated in the field or have some agreement where things are. So what's then becomes valid, of course, okay, we just talked about, but what's reliable, okay, so you've got to have some valid and reliable information. Reliable means that what you've just said or something could be repeated, it's repeatable, and so its behaviour is being characterised of the natural world, and your observation is, and you have a collective agreement about this, you see. So attestedness is where truth is, because it's just really acted upon to be discovered to be so. And I think that there's bits and pieces that relate to science that if you've got those bits below, it changes the pieces of all new information that come in. So, for instance, if you know that pasteurisation, where Pasteur was, that not a single flask of urine was ever not turbid, suddenly you would know, well, pasteurisation doesn't mean that something isn't turbid or wouldn't go turbid, because every single flask in an experiment that was done, it did go turbid. Okay. So where some change of some set is below, it changes the way that you might look at other things. And so there's a set of principles, of course, where life colloid terrain is. Now, we focus our work where everything is about the terrain, and then things arise within the terrain. And so it's adjusting and changing the terrain. So the life colloid terrain, someone could have appreciation, a really good feeling, and have some groundedness where bliss is, because you've achieved emptiness more. And what's tasteful or fragrant and things just like this, or what's happened when you've lost the taste for that. This is called our alliesthetic sense. And this sense has its own specialised areas of the brain and things and system itself. And it's really yours or my capacity to have a sort of an inner chemical sense. And it's a branch of a sense which is really relates to what's pleasurable and interesting, and the things which is more universal and inclusive more versus frozen logos instead. And so alliesthetics really is dealing with the principle more of a sense of your artistic taste of things and your spontaneous creative intelligence. And this really is what your alliesthetic sense is. And you've got like a polycodum, septal polycodum, which is quite responsible in your brain that has to be active, and then you've got access to your frontal cortex and everything. So the alliesthetic system is an apparatus which is a seat where pleasure is and sensation of interest, and also too what's adverse in this. And so the system itself is combined more as a polar completeness versus polarized, and degrees of something going on where something is where persons are integrated, or what degree of congruence and how associated are you to this present. So learning is where you're feeling like this noun we're talking about, alliesthetics, it's sort of like a verb of some actedness, but relating to a sense, which is alliesthetic. It's used in referring to a sense which we have And as a noun alloesthetic, the system of this is it causes you to feel like you've had enough nutrient, for instance, when you've had one peach or two peaches or something, and sort of like you might be hungry, but you lost the taste for peach. So this is called an alloesthetic sense change. This only work for things which is like live food, but could be tricked with a lot of other food. Synesthesia is existing. It's not just about food, of course, but the things which you're digesting, things that get assimilated and what have you. And so the system is engaging ever more sort of things which is universal, where the use of the vestibular sense is about direction, for instance. You're always moving toward pleasure and away from pain, and using direction more this way. And so it's really where somebody's got a definite eye ever more for aesthetics, you see. It's this set of principles, of course, which is about the life colloid terrain. And as you're feeling appreciated, sort of good and things like that, you've got endogenous opiates and these sorts of things, which is released. And the importance of this colloid of life cycle, which is existing, and something is not monomorphic, but more pleomorphic, where science is a valid, reliable applying of aggregating, fusing and differentiated process of the double spore and spores that come to make and differentiate all the organelle and internal structure of the cell as well as the cell. Those are all things we should, the double spores could differentiate back into a red blood corpuscle, you see. And this is science, and that the red blood corpuscle is made up of a double spore building block, and it's totipotent, so it's able to transform into any tissue and cells where the usefulness of this spore is, you see. And so all this is part of your blood where you're looking at this, and who's looking at the blood. So it's just really inexcusable that somebody would say that when you're looking at blood, or you didn't. Well, I would say certain where you have it, that wouldn't be too scientific, would it? So the life colloid transmutation is where sort of the importance of spores are, and health, where a certain amount of colloid of life and spore and double spore is found in your healthy blood. And it's possibly about to see various degrees of activity and things going on from this, you see. So spore really is a life colloidal, transmutatable survival or reproductive strategy that's used by life colloid, and multiple organisms made up of life colloid, including sort of corpuscle, which doesn't have any DNA and things. But other than that, then bacteria, mold, fungus, yeast, and plant cells and animal cells. And the robustness of this really is engaging this alloesthetic system. And so we start to talk about this because it's the septum pellicidum, which is in the frontal horns of the corpus callosum, and the fibres that's right there that's connecting your hemispheres together ever more. There's a partition that goes between the hemispheres, plus a ventricle that's very clean and clear, like a window, that is between the two ventricles of this large lake. And so your nerve and cortex and everything that's upstairs we're talking about right now, and you have a sense of something which is compatible and integration, and how you can be feeling interest where you are, and this is activating you to be ever more in your frontal cortex, plus you're releasing ever more leptin and kinetin and opiates and anandamide, you see. So it's the nerve and the body all more connected together. That's what this organ of alloesthetics is. And one neurologically, as pleasure does, inhibit aversion, and vice versa, you see. So the apparatus is the sensation of interest and pleasure or adversity of self, and the completeness where memory, learning and behaviour is. And so alloesthetics is really used as a noun. It's like, oh, you're feeling good, and you have an acquired sense of a taste, for instance. And once somebody's like me, I've tasted 2,000 different types of dirt. You come to taste everything and you get to appreciate what's a good tasting dirt, for instance. But The principles are more concerned where appreciation is of your beauty and art, where things are, and what are you presenting to people. Certain it is that somebody's got a bit more of an eye for aesthetics, that's for sure, and keeping things in terms of things which is more whole brain function means that, somebody's getting a therapeutic metaphor as they pass through this work. And so first piece of science which we would love to correct would be, or somebody could be hearing what this is that how dead food itself, life begets life and dead begets dead. Okay. You can only join life with life, and you can only join dead with dead. You could enliven something which is a substrate to cause life to be, but otherwise, it's dead begets dead. So dead food causes metabolic process to cease where the body is, and it's really got to borrow its enzymes and essential everything from it, life colloid, in a transmutative process which is going on in your garden you wrapped around, which is your intestine. Nutrient really has to be micronized. Did you know that? Maybe you should pay attention ever more, because there's so much that can be coming up, like your upper stomach, for instance, and liver and pancreas must have enzyme. Otherwise, where is the digestion? Where's your assimilation of any nutrient and cell respiration as a result from that metabolism? So is it scientific that you would not give a rabbit or any other life form dead food, right? Because if you do that at the zoo, they found out that's not right. Okay, so something has got some value of enzyme value in it. Otherwise, it's probable. Dead food is really non-functional, isn't it? Because why? It's enzymatically resistant, basic. It's enzymatically destroyed quite a bit. It's broken down. And what could you do where that is? Turn it into something else somewhat, but what have you got after that sort of thing? It's what your life colloid could produce maybe from things which is a substrate. So I'd be strongly not worrying, I guess, that nothing is very different whatsoever, that, you've cooked the food and it's got all these ceramides in it, which isn't nutrient, but a bit of a neurotoxin. And dimensionally, on a level of looking at it, like in 3 dimension at least, is processed, and it's not whole after that, not really. And without the enzyme, which is life-sustaining reaction, is that something would have ceased? Yes, basic. But of course, it can be kicked off. So it's like what was being debated at this time frame, that Bouchamp was around and Pasteur, but Bouchamp was correct about things. But let's just go on where something else is here. So enzymes really non-stop and never not. If they're denatured by heat, what about that? So because somebody said, that must be okay because they weren't fat in the blood. It's like, that's right. You're not to find it too much in the blood. You're going to find it in the immune system itself being transported. Okay. But what if you reckon the consequence where something isn't really fatal, yet there's a law of digestive enzyme and the secretion of enzymes where the body is, and the conservation of things? And so kinetic energy of enzymes really in molecules, which could be kept good, or no, it's destroyed. And you've got a zeta potential, which should be there, yes, but it's knocked out. Okay. So something was there, and you're looking at it, and let's say that enzymes got knocked out. Okay, what happened? Intense friction, vibration, smacked everything around and weakened the bond and lost all the hydrogen magneton bonds, you see. So you've got something which is maintaining the enzyme, and it's very delicate. It's got a 3D structure, and it's got coenzyme functionness with it and things. Otherwise, if you thought that's okay, we're going to just, give the rabbits all cooked dead food, that's science. It's like, it might be a collective agreement where you are, but it's certainly not science. So we should be able to recognize that, okay, and start to look to see all the places which it's grievous where that's not the case. So what's heated, certainly, somebody's going to say, no, that doesn't denature anything. No, that doesn't coagulate, congeal, make it some resistant material, make it hydrophobic. No. But yes, it does. Okay. So life food nutrient really has a physical structure. It's really not necessarily destroyed where the value of the nutritional enzyme is and thought, and it's the value of your digestion, and where something was really heated, it's via some digestive enzyme that has to come to be for that food. And so, it's what's unraveled, you see. A story where something's got an actual shape. It could be just not having broken any weak bond where that is. How good is that? You've got your hydrogen, disulfide, and all that sort of thing. But it could be broken by heat. And so the maintaining of those protein folded material really is a very good example of cooked egg like. And can that ever be mixed with water back again? No. Before that, could it have been mixed with water? Yeah, okay. But would you want to do that? Not really. Not for consumption. All right. So what was an egg? It sort of was opaque, sort of like where there was a whole food vitamin mineral complex that might have been or something. It's like just in that food. It's certain it's not, because why? Too many other things, which is really toxic about it. But what have you got that's water soluble? It's vitamin C sort of thing, and there's B vitamins where live food nutrition is. You've got particularly sensitive to heat. Is that science? Yes, it is. Is it science that somebody would say, oh, don't worry about that, everything's gone through heat, ceramided, cooked out, just chucked up with a bit of rock mineral? No, sorry, that's collective agreement again, but not science. It's like bandwagon appeal and slippery slope. So where anything is destroyed, it's leached out, it's gone into the cooking water, it's gone into the air or whatever. But what about the night that you have things and you've got like fat-soluble vitamins that's gone through the day a little bit, your A, D, E, and K and what have you? And what about if that really does lack a lot of stability and where going through the cooking process, it loses its zeta potential? So somebody will say, no, you could use high temperature. We do all the time, real high temperature. It leads to issues where the oxygen deprivation of the food material is, and it's nutrient that's locked out, that's deadly ceramides that's all put in, and sediment that comes to be because of this hydrophobic, congealed, coagulated, enzyme-resistant material that's formed. And that is to go on where clogged nerve and stunts or stuntedness where cellular repair and all growth could have been. And it's all dead nutrients, you see. And new toxin, of course, heat-induced chemical changed. So we can say, no, that doesn't happen. It's like, okay. It's like cooking really causes nutrient to be lost, dissolved, gone, and where's your absorption, where the life colloidal system has existed, where this is. You see, you've got proteins, which is folded, very specific. You've got hydrophobic amino acids all tucked inside, and you've got a function that really is no longer proper. Why? Because that protein isn't easy to be able to break down. And you don't have any enzymes to break it down properly. And didn't. Which it did out of an enzyme, but you lost it because it was all cooked out. And so you're heating proteins. Somebody's going to say, no, you don't denature those. I would say that's not so whatsoever. That's just highly wrong. So exposing material to heat causes hydrophobic, which means it's not mixed with water, and you've got portions where exposed oxidized substrate is definite and misfolded always. You've got proteins which really clump together, like we're saying, and aggregated, congealed, and coagulated all have lost their life colloidal transmutable types of function. Something could be acted upon as a substrate, but then that you've got to act upon that versus you could have got something from it. So extreme heat, somebody will say, no, that's not serious loss of nutrient. No, 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 no. Running through the things with EDTA, hey, that's fine. Why? Because it's nice colour. It's like, those are things which you could prepare food and you could cause everything to be more enzyme resistant. It's like, what about that? So dead food, certain, is denatured, and the process of loss of enzymes in a three-dimensional shape like we're just talking about, it's very questionable that whatever is, what it could contain some contradiction because it's got a resistance which implies some continued enhanced maybe function. It's like, no, really. Extreme heat always impairs and destroys the enzyme activity and other things. So you've really got a kinetic energy in its enzyme molecule. You're looking at the intense vibration, which is broken, or a weak bond, maybe that's there, like hydrogen and ionic bondedness, where you're making an enzyme delicate, which it does have, and it's got a three-dimensional structure. And where should that go? It's got to get into, small pores, like 40 nanometers small. Like, the membrane that's covering around your nucleus. Okay. It can only get there if it's got a zeta potential, you see. So I think that takes care of a lot of things, because many people are just mining something from the earth and thinking that's going to be fine, which it's not. No, it's not the same at all. Rhodium, osmium, and ruthenium has come through and processed through life. It's really more like football, slightly shaped. It's more like a river stone rounded. Why? Because it's got carbon atoms around it. Yeah, that's right. And then in a rock, does it have that? Not really so much about that. You see, something's got to be orthophilic. So meaning the magneton really have to have their magnetic domain, and where you mine something from the ground or what have you, it really is not going to have the same substrate whatsoever, not arranged proper, you see. So one's transmutatable, of course, by life, like an atom of iron that's been transported because of some fragrant amino acid that's there, good, and that's in a rose petal, let's say, okay. And that iron could be used, yes, because why? Well, it's come through life. But like, grinding up a bicycle or something and eating the metal, it's just putting in a sandwich isn't right, really, you see. So heavy metals like iodide, which iodine always loves to be with another iodide molecule called iodide, but if it's enzymatically stuck, what have you got there? You've got a heavy metal. So you're really talking about things and transitional states between metals and ceramics and this sort of thing. It's really what's causing tissue shape, mesentery organs, and then even the shape of your eye and everything will correspond where that is. And so swelling is where regional tissue is, and the shape of extraneous tissue and loose structure. And where heated element is, nobody's going to say that doesn't come into all the places where it shouldn't. And just the same as like astigmas, stigmatic types of condition where people got double vision or something, but it's the shape where light is bent by your body, and just the same, your eye is going to, as a cornea, have the same shape more or less as what your body is. And if you become more egg-shaped down there and inflamed, don't tell me that's not going to affect your cornea, which it does. And so even cornea differences and things can cause somebody to feel sort of got a bit of double vision going on. But it's really, tissue sort of kept on growing, like feet, nose, eyes, basic, hands, and everything else sort of maybe shrinks a bit. But the tissue of the body, just like the nerve of the eye, could have had some injuries and things. A natural aging process, and most of this could be something which can be healed up and healable. So, but what about artificial light? And if you didn't ever break into a trot, for instance, you see, you didn't have proper habit. But enzyme resistance comes along where a substrate would have lost its enzymatic properties through heat, for sure. and the material really becomes very difficult to break down after that. And after you've eaten that, what time did you do it? You've got enzyme resistance where it's describing the substrate is capacity to just withstand or inactivate a state of its own enzymatic activity. And so enzymes are called forth, of course, to help probably break all of that down. And sort of pleomorphs into more life colloid. And after altering all of that substance, somebody sort of could be targeting some enzyme or nutrient value, which truly is lost after that. So in a world of live food, which we're just talking right now about what's happened where somebody's eaten only cooked food, or, oh no, you got some microgreens on your plate and this sort of thing, you had some enzymes, you had some lipase, maybe from a bit of avocado or whatever, and things that were water soluble, where otherwise it's enzyme resistant, and the cooking process would have caused a restrictiveness of where enzymes are, and DNA or would have started to be cut down and things, and enzymes produce more for those things. And it's really a cloud of life, ever more of an assembledness of a life colloid enzymatically active that's useful for DNA or RNA, these sorts of things. So where heat destroys vitamin, of course, it sure does. It wipes out its zeta potential. And so it's endogenous, acted upon by digestive enzymes and that sort of thing, that food substrate, yet it's really only your own juices and not anything that came from the substrate you ate, which, that's a bit of a waste. So beforehand, what you've got is your own enzyme lost in the processing, which is something talked about here a little. Excessive heat denatures the protein, makes it more susceptible to enzymatic digestion somewhere else and not resistant so much to it. But what have you got after that, you see? It's the observation of what was there and your vitamin and mineral and other element and things, and not just an empty, dead, skeletonized calorie, you see. So where something was heated, it becomes ever more hydrophobic. It becomes very excessive where heat is, denatures the protein, and so it's no longer in its double bonded state more where things are, where water is, and it makes it more enzyme resistant. And it's a knowledge where life water is made in your body, and there's only 3 types of water molecule overall, and what's made in your body is H3O2, and where you've got stress, you should really don't drop lower than having a loss of 5% of what you're supposed to have. This is very critical. And so it impacts calcium, and calcium could have gone through the roof, and heavy metalloids will inhibit processing of the nerve force. And what happens where sediment from all that was indigestible, and massive amounts of that, and microplastic and everything, the dead inland rock, salt, indigestible and untransmutatable or what have you. And just with a brush border down there at the micropillary, all of you've got a mountain of that. So heavy metal, magnesium stearate, calcium carbonate, you've got phosphate, calcium carbonate. You've got all of that filled with stone and quite enzyme relatively restrained. You've got iron filings all thrown into enriched flour, which we don't have any capacity, like we're talking about. That's not an orthophilic element. And so no place sort of exists for where mine mineral would have been inland, like just drawn into food. And if heated in excess, it's like a solvent, you see. Your body has to have a full complex where everything is. Otherwise, what happens where that terpene is? You see, somebody's going to actually say that that's in the alcohol you absorb. No. It's not, because it's not water soluble, you see, especially where heat was used. So nutrient is monatomic nutrient state is in its zeta potential. It's got the capacity to easily slip through another charge directly, and to get into the smallest pores like we're talking about, like quite extraordinary osmolytic element. So heat quickly destroys zeta potential, and heat wipes it out. So magneton on the outside of the nutrient and zeta potential, magneton is kept, and you've got a negative and positive charge otherwise on the surface of the particle in suspension. But once heated, what have you got? You've got zeta potential otherwise, and you've got that usually like a positive, between a positive and negative 30 millivolts there created. It's a strong enough magnostatic type of repulsion where the magneton, where this is in its togetherness, is keeping everything in its proper dispersed, relative, stable state. But what happens where if you only eat dead cooked food? You think that actually something like zeta potential could be missing? So live food, because zeta, of course, is more attention to zeta potential, and you've got otherwise an inductible sort of weak repulsion, and are leading all of that otherwise to an increased particle collisions. If you don't have it, it's a potential aggregation and causes instability where colloidal systems are. So Jubb cell rejuvenation, you're paying attention to this, is targeting the fluids that are flowing more with you and getting your microcirculation ever more improved. So could you say that zeta potential isn't important? And what about life food nutrition influencing zeta potential, which includes parts of hydrogen, which is supposed to be there, and it's altering where the surface charge has been, where you're producing life water, which is H3O2, it's structured water. And so it's got its south positive added and subtracted, and pronation and depronation, and a magneton particle is of a strength which is affecting a polar completeness where you are. And that's the reason why you would want to do a lemon bicarb shock, because you've got magnetic atom and screening and double layers where things are, and temperature, which otherwise destroys those double layers. So the membrane of life colloid, where red black hole particles are, got this double layer thickness, and you could really see a concentration of vitamin L, which is life hydrate, and it says it's a surfactant, it's adsorbed onto the particle surface. And so you're looking at a nature of a particle which modifies the way that it responds to everything else. And it's critical because you've got a conferring, determining, inherent a magneton charge existing that assisting a functional group where tissue is. So if you add little bits of material or you insert it or things, what did that do to the zeta potential? Would that be kept or lost? Because you've got a north negative that gets stripped off the particle, and so what's to flocculate afterward and or get incorporated? You've got cold processed nutrient, or no, you don't have that. The nutrient is wiped out because its magnetic primer charge on the surface and the magnetization of its functional surface membrane has been changed. Or no, you've got membrane permeability surfactant enhancement. Ooh, wow. So, this is an area where things are, isn't it? So basically, like if you've got live food, you're going to have something which has got more membrane permeability surfactant enhancement. And you've got your own surfactant that you could produce, which is N-acetyl neurominic acid. And when you use other surfactants from animals and stuff, you can't break that down, and it's really toxic. So hydrogen ion and liquid medium leads you to have a net positive or negative charge where the particle surface is, and live food makes sure that you've got your UVB, UVA rays and things like this, all assisting to coming through your eyes. You've got micromineral where everything is. You've got a proper amino acid and everything. You're producing a direct current through your eyes, or no, you're not, because why? You've got too much white, bright blue light, and it's destroying that system. So magneton move, you've got magnetophoresis and boundaries, which is called a slipping plane. And this is this magneton plane which is able to move within a substrate to get into a 40 nanometer small pore like we're talking about. So molecule has to have its zeta, and it has to be able to be beyond and stay to itself versus no, it got pulled to be more into the bulk solution instead. So zeta potential, it truly is a magnekinetic potential that is measurable. A slipping plane represents sort of a magnitude of a surface, which is a charge, like what we're saying, and it's a double layer. It's life force and life food getting sufficient magnesium and potassium and consuming, proper food. You've got then omega-3, omega-6, and omega fats that come from a saturated fat because you got that consumed. You've got a massive amount of South positive, very thick on one right close to the membrane, and now you've got a lot of South North negative that's all surrounds that or outside of itself like a double membrane. And so monosaturated fat gives us red blood corpuscle and other cell membranes this like a double cell membrane type of a conditioning actually, which is magnetic. And so zeta potential decreases over time or quickly, of course, where some larger amount of concentrated heat was or magneton was ever more, something became dehydrated. And so a loss of mineral and micronutrient like iodine, fluorine, and magnesium, which is so water-loving, it just goes off where the water is, basically. And so red blood corpuscle, where flow is very discrete and maintaining a really beautiful remain tension and conformity between them. And it's got a north negative that's pushing them apart somewhat, and a south positive that's pulling them a little more, keeping them together a bit. So a zeta potential is a measurement where the magneticity potential, where a slip plane is there, and that the particle where the liquid is that you're looking at has this good slip plane. And why wouldn't you want to look at your blood? Because now you can see this. Otherwise, did you see it before? No. It's like, wow, well, how unscientific is that? Look, you're separating everything from where the moving fluid layer is and a stationary bulk fluid is. You've got a showing where a magnetic static charge is noted, and an interface, of course, of all this where particle is, where you've got a liquid carrier like blood. And so material that contacts where liquid is developing a surface charge or not, how much sodium is there or not. Wow, that's going to impact stuff quite greatly, as a matter of fact. Which, if you're looking at a slipping plane and a zeta potential is about, it's a molecule that's suspended and it's really able to move freely without being attracted into the bulk of its that it's moving into. So life fluid has its zeta. Cold processings do. You've got this magnetic double layer around each particle that's destroyed by heating. You've got life colloid, and it's all cold processed. It's sort of consisting ever more of what's more got its own stern layer left intact, and a diffuse layer that you can see after that. You've got a zeta potential that's indicative of a magnitude, which really has got a good surface charge, a sign of this, and it's suspended as a particle where life through nutrition is. If you follow nature, you're going to really have an absolute more zeta potential. Otherwise, it's suggested to you that you've got some strong repulsion otherwise that's between the particles, and that's preventing them from being aggregated, you see. So without zeta potential, you've got a coagulant, congealed, clumped particle. You've got a lot of instability in the dispersion where blood is. And so what is cold process where nutrients is, you've got a really proper zeta potential, and you can get things traveling down into this 40 nanometer pore, which is where the nucleus membrane is in a cell. So you can see cold processed nutrient is maintaining of its zeta potential. You've got a beautiful natural structure that's proceeding ever more where the influenceness of this potential you see, and the substrate of the particle where you've got passive hydrogen, this sort of thing is sort of really the magneton strength and what colloidal chemical composition where the carrier and dispersed medium is. And measuring zeta potential is sort of critical because we're tested in this using the characterization of life colloid, especially its transmutation, where the intestinal tract is. You've got a chemistry of the material itself, and predicting where something could be more controllable, where some stability is more, where nanoparticle is created or polymerizations. You've got folded protein templates, and this is all using aggregating, physically differentiating process, not mitotic cell division. So the colloid of life is various where the formulations are, and cold processing is for this reason, you see. So cold processing where the formulas are and cell rejuvenation really requires more strict insight where zeta is, and reasoning to see, of course, what's gone on where dead food is, and it's seriously inferior substance overall, and not naturally whatsoever sustainable at all. So zeta potential really is a measurement that you're supposed to have there of your clinical, empirical, factual guide to what you're saying. You're giving somebody information about something because you've got membrane permeability, surfactant enhancement. You've got skin absorption at the surface and modification. You've got alteredness of phytonutrient where particle charge is, so it can get absorbed across the tongue and this sort of thing. Six stage nutrient. You've got amber glycolics, which could be used to clear away neoplastic additions on the skin and this sort of thing, and it's applied. And internal has great application where the formulas are complex with saliva, where this is, because it's got to have thyroid hormone complexing it. So zeta potential really is a monitored process of coagulatedness or flocculation or sedimentation where industry is, and what is the environmental context sort of. So understanding zeta is very essential, controlling colloidal material properties, you see, and somebody's got to have a bit more substrate and life colloid and chemical sort of educatedness. But cold processing keeps the enzymatic whole food vitamin complex where and keeps this magnetic double layer that we're talking about. So if you're understanding how the cooked dead salt is not transmutatable and it's got not any enzymatic linkages anymore, and so it's really accumulative where something is in its unphysiological state as a mineral crystallized ever more and holding water and weight and things to itself in magnetic valence, and it destroys the zeta potential of other things, and it really high salt and unphysiologically really does reduce the double layer. It's the slipping plane, and zeta potential is then lost. So you've got a magnetic polyvalence versus dead food filled with rock mineral, and you're looking at a double layer there. Otherwise, having become collapsed instead, and it's supposed to be having a bit of repulsion, but it doesn't. It has no repulsion at all. And so this is what you're looking at in a colloidal terrain. It's the energy barrier of the aggregate and dispersion, you see. So zeta is a potential where low sodium is inside the cell, good. You've got a zeta potential. And where rock salt is, wow, heavy metal is not being kept out. You're going to see that really impacting everything. So this is the reason why vitamin L, which is N-acetyl-luminic acid, is so vital, and why that's the reason it's in our gene, pool. That's our surfactant. And it's different from other animal surfactant and things. So you're looking at diffused double layers where things are, it's got its positive south lined up and concentrated, like we said, and then that's surrounded by a magnetic domain of north negative, which is imparting sort of a bit of a 0-point minimum potential where this is, you see. So that zero potential really is where energy is tapped, a magneton dispersal where aqueous solution is, applying vitamin L. You're going to look and see how that modifies the surface tension, and it reduces otherwise magnolite and things which would have got absorbed, and the interactedness of where things should be on a solid surface, and it's not where it should be. It could be a magnetic B-field charge. It comes to be, and a charge where environmental more it impacts. And vitamin L is a magnetic enhancement where cell surface double magnetic layers are. So H3O2, which is life water, is adsorbed, and on a solid state interface, sort of you've got positive south charge, which pulls layers of north negative toward this, and you've got a zeta potential. Otherwise it's lost when you cook, you see. You've got no care for the flow where energy is. A metal colloidal deposit, and images of all of this is identified by character matching and things where you've got a lot of education which could go on, and it's built in a way that perhaps it should build a proper logarithm that's existing. So what science is, you've got a cross-disciplinary background that's looking at field specialised course crossing over sort of actual one-point types of views where that would have been, but given a stop-itness of all other inquiry where you can understand, hey, if your body's accumulating toxic, you've got heavy metals, it's going to switch off your immune system, that's right, and why not broaden what's going on where your own insight is about that metalloid deposit where the tissue is, and the calcium phosphate and carbonate and iron, magnesium, iodide, copper, arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium. I just can't think of like a lot of this stuff. So if this is not serious, a physiological condition, what's known? Is that really about heavy metal toxicity and detoxification that's supervised, where your care is more professional in the way that you're clearing away these heavy metals? Or is that, no, this is going to be without life food guidance, it's going to have no effectiveness much, it's not going to be really led to anything. Primary treatment you would think here would be Jubb cell rejuvenation therapeutics, and the product and everything which removes and helps people clear away metal and diastatic toxin and plastics and cyanhydric acid. And it does this with clathration. So clathration is tiny little cages that form in the water, and it's natural, which you've got to encourage a natural process so that you're consuming live food, but not otherwise. So the clathrate has these tiny cages that are open three sides of themselves and attract substance like toxin or anything to itself to make it more water soluble. And where molecules are of one type, like the gas, for instance, and clathrate could be existed within this, you've got a cage-like structure that's formed by another molecule where the host is. And so colloidal transmutation is where you've got one life colloid within another. You've got gas hydrates and hydrogen sulfur, methane, clathrates, little cages. You've got water molecule, crystalline cage, where it's around such gas and molecule, and like methane, for instance, under some conditions, you've really got more high pressure and temperature, which forms colloidal nanostructure, where ice water would be looked at. You could see crystallizedness of where the structure is, you see. So protein is gas, and it's supposed to be enzymatically linked, can be broken down to a gas and breathed off. Colloids of life, where Jubb cell rejuvenation, it's really colloid becoming life colloid as a spore, double spore, becoming corpuscle cell, and otherwise recycle back through a healthy cycle. Otherwise, it's taken through a pleomorphic cycle, including mold, fungus, and yeast and bacteria and things in the blood. So where life food is, you're looking at your blood and my God, it's like perfect. You've got blood-borne inhibitors that's blocking and stopping the double spore from ever going into a pleomorph state of fermentation. And life hydrate introduced where water is structures that more to be H3O2. And so isn't this something which should ever be a bit more critical where you are? You've got a network lattice of a structure of water, and small molecules and atoms can be enclosed within the open space of clathrate cage. You've got life hydrate, for instance, that does this. You've got gas hydrates, host where water is, and gasetedness of gases. That's very useful. And as nitrogen is, or carbon dioxide, for instance, noble gases, all form under specific conditions where low temperature and high pressure could be. And so stabilize where the cage structure is in nature, you see. And so these are the things that are going on which cause structured water. Oh, wow, really? Yes. So a molecule that shapes that water into life water really is the presence of something you could look at. It's sort of really got a beautiful crystal clathrate, open resemblances of ice, like a crystalline solid. Life hydrate, when it's micronized, it's really a nano material that's acted upon where a trapped guest might be, where a molecule is stabilized, where it's got its host lattice, or it's inside that. So it makes it possible for you to have life water. Life hydrate does this, and you've got a magnetic structure, and so heating afterward really can not let the structure remain, but this sure does. After heating, it still remains a relative structure. You've got life hydrate in the water. So without that seed material, it would really collapse more, and a normal icing or liquid state would have been. So specific cages all have a formness, and like boron, and that's put into the mix, you're going to see tubular more cages. Carbon, you're going to see ever more perfect lattice of hexagonalness, and a specific arranged desire where magneton is a host sort of. You've got molecule where are formed unique types of cage in the overall structure. And so this is very common where you've got gases, methane, hydrate, you've got clathrates, which form from gas and things. And then acetylulamic acid, vitamin L, which is the most important surfactant occurring. You've got sialic acid, which is assisting yours, my cell, and cells identify each other and engage where interactiveness is. And for this, you've got silica, which can transmutate a charge in the same with carbon. Otherwise, what interaction there is just critical for a life colloidal process. So detoxification is clearing away bacteria which is not meant to be there in the environment and changing the terrain. Boosting the immune system, life hydrate really promotes the more binding of calcium ions to macromolecule and things. And so it's very intrinsic where you've got a glycoprotein, you've got facilitated gels, formations and things where life water is. So life hydrate, where you drink this every day, you've got a vitalness for water, which is ever more turning into life water itself. And so forms of this has got this N-acetyl in front of an amino acid, like N-acetylcysteine, for instance, but where nutrient condiment would be greatly applied, antioxidants are also. And if you're reading common symptom where you're fasting, life hydrate really is commonly used. And it's N-acetylulamic acid as a vitamin L, helping clear away phlegm and mucus and cause expectoratedness, and it improves everything to help clear up where flu could have been and dry eyes, where flu is supposed to be proper. Life hydrate support is, and so many symptoms which are too numerous to mention. Some of the big ones, of course, vitamin L is helpful with. You've got this N-acetylulamic acid, and it improves lipid metabolism and stops hyperlipidemia, associated sort of coagulation, which you've got excessive fats and things, blocking and stopping conduction. You've got dead food, like it's really full of methionine as a new toxin that breaks down to homocysteine. And then if you don't have B vitamins, what's going to happen there? So it really forms in a very sharp, sharded material when you look at that. And that passing through your blood scours the arteries. So acid, where things are, could have cleared up some of that lipoprotein. Otherwise, all of it gets start to lay down where the arteries are. And cholesterol could be too high, and high cholesterol primarily impacting cardiovascularness and plaque in the arteries, you see. So restricting blood flow, all of that could have led to not having a good heart condition. And methionine not broken down properly ends up as homocysteine, and that for sure is spiked out, and proteins which get broken where the membrane is. So without proper vitamin B necessary, where you would have it in live food, you've got also no excessive methionine either, where live food is. Otherwise, just from that dead food consumption, relentless, you've really got large amounts of homocysteine, and all of that gets sharded, and you would never say that's not highly corrosive, because it's the reason for lipoprotein A being laid down inside the arteries to help protect the arteries from that shardedness and its caustic conditioning. So if the diet is seriously got more corrosive effect, like sandblastedness, like the arteries, like we're talking about, I mean, nobody's really looking at that or even has any answers. It's really not that something isn't being seen which methionine has, looking like where it does where homocysteine is afterward. It's really got very damaging shape in the way it crystallizes, and it absolutely does have an effect on the delicate inner lining where blood vessels are. So if you don't know that that's a mechanism of corrosion and how this is going on, endothelial cells are getting scrubbed, sandblasted, and because several mechanisms of corrosion is there where damages and costing injury and harm a significant factor to your endothelial cells, you've got cardiovascular challenge where you've eaten way too much methionine from bean and flesh, and that's going to break down to homocysteine, and how are you going to break that down after without B vitamins? So it's wide cell endothelial damage, which physical structures where that sharp sharded stuff is. You've got serious oxided where the membrane is highly corrosive and it's impaired and it blocks and stops the flow. And live food doesn't have any of that impaired vessel loss. You see, it doesn't have a loss of functionness, whereas homocysteine in excess or folded protein, some of it comes to be stopped. It's a function of the protein that, because it's not really meant to be there, a species where our body is, can you be able to break it down? But if somebody's listening, they should be considering how flesh and bean really is so high in methionine and how it contributes to a high homocysteine. It's got excessive phosphates and excessive glutathione. And so what's not broken down gets fermented, and then, like, do you have any B vitamin or folate, like B9, or B6 pyridoxine, or B12 cobalamin? Because blood homocysteine levels where that would have been high, you really need to be able to have these elements to be able to break that down. And so, are you getting the bigger picture right now about live food and stopping flesh bean and stopping all the excessive methionine and homocysteine because of, like what we just said, the corrosive serious impact that has non-stop on inflammation and the laying down of lipoprotein A, which is a major reason for that being laid down in the arteries. And so you don't think that all carries all sorts of oxidized phospholipids and it's all carried out ever more triggering inflammation of the artery wall? Sure it does. The sticky plaque is not a part of that, and it's not going to stick your blood together and anything like that. Oh yeah. And your blood vessels and things like this are not vulnerable to rupture. Yes, they are. So the direct effect of diet mirrors all this, and you'd be hard pressed to say that dumb lack reasoning behind, hey, enzymes don't count for nothing. It's like, and what about cooked food? Oh no, it's the same. Of course, eating flesh and bean and high fat carbs, all of this is good for you. It's like, I don't think it probably could be. You'd want to look and listen into this. Dead food is stone forming and cysteine mixing and sharp shards of crystal flowing, like, where high pressure air is blowing it around. You've got endothelial cells, cysteine starts to get oxidizing, and the amino acids, cysteine is sort of a molecule excreted more where a larger amount is. It can be a genetic condition of cystinuria, but it's participating in acid urine, and it forms all sorts of crystals and stone. So live blood cell analysis really allows you to be able to see this, doesn't it? And for somebody saying that if you haven't seen your blood, it's not scientific, it's like, okay, well, I could understand that. You should be able to see your blood for sure, otherwise maybe it's not scientific. I would agree with that for sure. So it's really not in turn or out of turn that blood and your corpuscle and cell where that's existing could have some analysis of this. And your red blood corpuscle is really a good live looking at it under a microscope. You're going to get various indicators of your health and illness and how the red blood corpuscle's shape is and its size, and also the white blood cells, you see. So the platelet also an appearance. You've got signs of health or oxidative stress and potentials where nutritional deficiencies exist, you see. And the presence certain of parasite and plasma terrain that's been pleomorphed. And so it's a bit blind if the site where you have would have been dumbed down and what's allowed or not of this scientific validated diagnostics where some testedness is. Blood is really much the same way. You will have missed a bus reputably where any health organizedness of approach, unless you've brought in any of the stones that's been a bit unturned before. And so many things spoken, of course, is maybe a new insight where things are, and jumping in where these ideas to have thought everything out more. But like, what's the condition able, of course, where you're able to look at your blood and you could do live blood cell analysis, and you could really detect the various things like deficiency of calcium and lipids not broken down properly. You've got excessive protein. You'd feel that you're not able to see this in another way, but you could look and see this for sure with your blood, and the impact of vitamin deficiency, like not having enough B6. So it's possible to detect where allergy, heavy metal, where the blood is loaded, where crystal cholesterol is, uric acid. Modern medicine could have controlled you from having seen those things, but the information and mycotoxin present there that you could see what's your bladder gland, pancreas and gastrointestinal tract functioning, and what's pertinent to how this affects your blood. So you're supposed to be able to see, oh, you've got parasite, yeast, mold, fungus in your blood. It's like, yes. So not looking at the blood under a microscope, you certainly wouldn't have seen anything like this. You wouldn't have been able to get any abnormal cell to have looked right. You wouldn't have even seen the blood. And not for you to have any morphologicalness right. If you didn't look at the live bloods, what would you say? I didn't want to, I didn't care to, I didn't see the blood, I wouldn't know if the blood was unusual in its size and shape. And what would be the benefit that you actually, if you did have that information? When the colour of the red blood corpuscle. So you'd know anemia or thalassemia. So the flow of the surface exchange, and looking at blood, you'd have immature or abnormal cells. You could look at that. You've got immature blood corpuscle, crystals of cholesterol. They don't look right, of course, and you could have extraneous amounts of white cells, and you're looking at a living, moving picture more where the blood is, and you could certainly see where anemia would be, and where the parasite was as a fungus or something in the blood. So platelets of white cell abnormality you'd be looking at and thinking about and seeing. You'd see the red blood corpuscle identified where platelets, immune cell abnormalities are, and investigating abnormalities, it's more automated, you see it should be. And so life colloid transmutation is where you've got one cycle where health is. You've got the double spore building block, and that's inhibited through aggregation, fusion, differentiation from fermenting, where the life colloid double spore is able to remain there in the blood as a component of the blood, but not be AFD'd into something fermentive. Otherwise, you can see sporulation that goes on where you've got not too much immune cell activity because it's got really small places like basal ganglia, and you have a sporulation and the usefulness of the spore going along and exiting at the skin to release that acid. So cell importance where spore is a very scientific observation at the microscope, shows how spore build and have blocks of complex life that's carrying on, where even in outer space in panspermia. So life colloid transmutation in the intestine is a role which has got great properties, extending your life, and has a wide range of body function. That's where things are. Yes, so I think that if you're thinking about the importance again of the life cycle of the pleomorphic life cycle, which is something scientific which we're bringing out here, it applies more to aggregation, fusion and differentiation of the life colloid, meaning this is how the process that they grow and change, or they differentiate, meaning they become more specialized in what it's doing. So red blood corpuscle is totipotent. It's made up out of double spore building block that make up the red blood corpuscle. It's totipotent, meaning it can transform into any body tissue what's useful where the spore is. So you see, you've got life colloid transmutation and the importance of where spore is, and in health, certain amount of colloid of life and spore and double spore you can see in healthy blood. So spore is really biologically surviving where reproductive strategies are, and you've got bacteria, fungi, algae, plants and things, and you've definitely got this robustness where things are. Coming full circle to this alloesthetic system, of course, the septal pellicudum at the front horns where the corpus callosum is, we talked about, where that fibre is connecting it between the hemispheres. You've got a beautiful partition and that ventricle and sensing everything between the large legs. And so, you know, the more you've got a hemisynchronization going on where you've got felt pleasure and integration, you've got anandamines, ketamines, opiates, leptins all being sensed. And this is your sense of alloesthetics, and this is functioning for you. A de-differentiation or differentiation goes on where something reverse differentiates. It goes back to be into a red blood corpuscle from a fat cell, for instance, or it went from a red blood corpuscle into a fat cell, or a red blood corpuscle would become a phagocytic cell. Different degrees of its learnedness as to what to do to help clear up debris in the body. But the material of that immune cell came from a red blood corpuscles, double spores, reverse differentiating out of the corpuscle and aggregating, fusing and differentiating into a phagocytic cell, an astrocyte even.